In 5 years here, as I count them, she may count differently, but I count 5 books that she is responsible for. She did co-edited, I should say, and participated and organized in the conference on Callias to Critias, studying late 5th century art. She has worked on a cooperative volume, the Cambridge Companion to Ancient Athens. She has written with other people a history of the American school. She has put together a book on horses that go with the exhibit that you can still see. A book for younger audiences about the horse Avra. So that, to me, is 5. It may well be more than that, and if so, she will undoubtedly correct me. But most of us don't write 5 books in our entire career, and she did it while she was running the American school. And one of the ways she did it is through her cooperative nature and through her strong feeling that students should be engaged as soon as possible. So for the horse volume, students were invited to contribute chapters on specific themes. And like many, but by no means all our directors, she led trips bringing the students to the Peloponnese pretty much every year. So in teaching and in scholarship, she has not given up one moment of her time while she was also running the American school. She also, for a while, was the curator of part of the Cleveland Museum, again, with the ancient arts. And she has used that skill and that training as well by producing the show on horses, Hippos, which I've already mentioned. So we have her scholarship, we have her teaching, and we have her museum work, all amply reflected in her 5 years here. Other things that fall under the category I think of when I think of the school's senior positions fall under the heading of thankless tasks. And all the senior positions at the American school have lots and lots of those. At the end of the day, you can sit down at your desk and see what you did and ask yourself, how many things did I do today that had anything to do with my training as a classical archaeologist? And the answer will come out as a loud and resounding nothing. You cannot predict what is going to come through the door, particularly if you're a director of the American school. And among the things she has done for us is she has finished off a long-term project in opening up Loring Hall as a new and improved residence for our students and our visiting scholars. And literally hundreds of decisions had to be made during these 5 years in order to bring the building to a useful and successful conclusion. The other one we did not predict is COVID. And during COVID, she was very careful, very energetic in making sure that those people who were here at the school could do as much as they possibly could in the library in terms of being taken care of, in housing and in feeding them, but at the same time, making sure that nobody was in any unnecessary danger. And one has to say that the easiest way to judge her abilities there is to look at the results where so few people were affected by that. And finally, she embraced an offshoot of the COVID situation. She embraced the use of videos and actively participated in making them, made the rest of us do them, and also filmed pretty much every lecture in Coates and Hall. So we now have, which we did not have 5 years ago, we didn't have even 3 years ago, is quite a large video library of talks, conferences, and specially designed presentations literally by the dozen that are now available and make up a whole new aspect of our archiving and of outreach and interesting a greater number of people in the work of the American School. So that on my list is 7 different things that Jenifer has done full-time, full steam for 7 years. And I would ask you all to join me in thanking her for this magnificent 5 years of her directorship. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John, and we all owe you a debt of gratitude for all you have done to the school, which we will celebrate later this month. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and thank you all for coming to the annual meeting of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. It is my honor and great pleasure to present the work of the school during the past 2 years. The open meeting traditionally begins with necrology, but you will find memorials to some of our departed members in the newsletters on the table outside the auditorium. Nothing can honor more the memory of each of these individuals than the continuation of the work of the school, which meant so much to them. In that spirit, I will highlight the contributions of the living tonight, those who have made the American School the thriving institution it is today. With its substantial endowment, its new or newly renovated buildings, its increasing number of fellowships for scholars, and its tremendous new initiatives in outreach. This year, we celebrate our 140th anniversary, and the school has never been more productive in terms of scholarship, more active across all of Greece, and more committed to our mission. So, I would first like to thank the many loyal supporters who have made the last 5 years a success, in spite of the economy, the pandemic, and now a dreadful war in the Ukraine. I begin with our Board of Trustees, chaired by Alex Zagorias, followed by our Gennadius Library Board of Overseers, led by Andreas Zombonakis. At the helm of the Friends, or Fili, of the Gennadian is Ambassador Katerina Bura. The members of the school's Alumni Association have always been loyal supporters of the institution, as have various foundations. The Malcolm H. Wiener Foundation, the Packard Humanities Institute, the Arete Foundation, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, and the Mellon and Kress Foundations, to name just a few. Please join me in thanking all of these generous supporters with a round of well-deserved applause. The core of the American School is its 9-month academic program. This program came to an abrupt halt in March 2020 and only resumed 17 months later when we finally welcomed our student members to Athens in September 2021. Many of them had postponed their admission from the previous year, and so were doubly eager to come to Greece. One of our intrepid students biked all the way from Sparta just to get here. In the meantime, we had fortunately finished the renovations of Lorraine Hall, the members' residence, and there'll be more on that later. Our newest Mellon Professor of Classical Studies is a well-known figure around the American School, Brendan Berg, who began in September. He excavates at Elion in Boeotia and is a professor at the University of Victoria in Canada. He led the Central and Northern Greek trips last fall. The Whitehead visiting scholars this year are Nigel Kennell, who gave a seminar on the Greek Symposium, and Teresa Shawcross, who taught a course on Byzantine Athens. In addition to these trips, last summer we also offered on-site courses in micromorphology and one in site formation and stratigraphy, taught by the Wiener Laboratory Director, Takis Karkanis, and Professor Paul Goldberg of Boston University. The students traveled from Thassos to Crete, visiting over 300 sites and museums. We had beautiful weather, as you can see in this photo of Methone, and an array of expert guest speakers. Here you see on the left Professor Themelis of Messini and Sherry Stocker giving a tour of the palace of Nestor at Pylos on the right. After 2 aborted trips to Greece last year because of COVID, our third try was successful. It was led by Tom Brogan of INSTAP in Crete and our excellent assistant director, Simone Agrimonti. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, many of these students are off to Ionia and Caria on an optional trip led by our former Whitehead scholar, Chris Rattay of the University of Michigan. After a successful staff outing to Corinth 3 years ago, this spring we finally managed to have a second staff ectromy, this time to ancient Nemea. Just before it was named the European Heritage Site by the European Union, and only the second site in Greece after the Acropolis. So now to our 90-year-old residence hall for members, Loring Hall, which finally had a facelift and reopened last summer. This was a 5.8 million euro construction project, and it has the following new improved features. We have a new 3rd floor on the annex, with 2 double rooms and a beautiful apartment that I call the penthouse, 2 internal elevators and an outdoor lift from the garden, a bedroom and bathrooms for the disabled, which are AMIA, qualified. And we put in a workout room with exercise equipment, an expanded beautiful new kitchen with chef's equipment. And most important, we finally have air conditioning and insulated noise-proof windows. Here is a view of the Salone with its new furniture, artwork, and curtains. And we landscaped all around the building. Here's a before and after picture of the garden between what is now Macready House and the main building. Now, as John mentioned, we had a robust lecture program ever since COVID started. Initially, all of our lectures were online during that time, and now we have hybrid lectures like tonight's. We continued to offer a series of lectures, new ones like that on ancient Greek painting, which was co-organized with Professor Dimitri Plansos of the University of Athens, and continuing ones like Live from the Athenian Agora, Byzantine Dialogues, and Live from the Wiener Laboratory. We offered a certificate to students who watched these lectures, and we made sure that they watched the whole lecture, and then they were given credit, not credit, but a certificate, and I've already seen these listed on their resumes. And so far, we've had over 400,000 viewers online watching from various media platforms, which demonstrates how eager the public is for educational digital media. We have, I'm gonna try it tonight, just a minute, did I go too far? No, okay, that was it. We have our media manager, Konstantinos Georginis, to thank for his skills behind the camera, operating the drone, and production work in the studio. You saw an example of his amazing work at the beginning of the program. This spring, we were able to offer in-person conferences in Coates and Hall. You notice here on the left, the keynote for one on ancient Argos, which was co-organized with the French and British schools by Evan Vance, who was one of our second-year students. And the Schwartz Foundation, as usual, has been very generous, and it sponsored a series of meetings on urban planning in Athens. Most ambitious on the part of the school is the new Thalia Potamianos lecture series, which has been funded for 10 years by our Gennadian overseer, Fokion Potamianos. The first was here in Athens last winter, and the second was held in Washington, D.C., and the third will be next week in New York on May 10th. The featured speaker is a prominent professor of global history at Oxford and an award-winning author, Peter Frankopan. These lectures will eventually be published, and we are most grateful to Mr. Potamianos for initiating this scholarly project. Now we move on to our actual publications. In 2021, we published the papers presented at 2 conferences held here at the school in 2019, which I think must be a record for getting new research into print. Cambridge University Press published The Destruction of Cities, which was a conference organized by our past Mellon professor, Sylvain Fachard, and Professor Edward Harris. And on the right is Callias Tikritias, with papers on art and architecture of the late 5th century in Athens, which was co-edited by myself and Professor Olga Pogia, and was published by De Gruyter. Our journal, Hesperia, has a beautiful new look on the cover as debuted in the January 2022 issue. The contents are equally dramatic, as seen in this new reconstruction of the interior of the Temple of Ares in the Agora by Professor Andrew Stewart of Berkeley. 2 new monographs about ancient Corinth appeared this year. Our 51st Hesperia supplement on the Pinakes from Pentascoufia by Professor Eleni Hasaki. And another red Corinth volume publishing the small terracotta finds from the Sanctuary of Demeter in Kore by Professor Sonia Klinger. And I would just like to point out here how many volumes devoted to this one sanctuary at Corinth have been published to date, thanks to the careful oversight of its excavators, Ronald Stroud and Nancy Bukaides. This latest is number 8, and we look forward to more. Last but not least, certainly not least, is a new Agora picture book by Colin Whiting devoted to dogs. And as you can see, my pet Atticus is fully absorbed in this latest publication. And on the subject of books, we held a large book sale in February for overstocked duplicates and generally outdated books. It was a big success thanks to the Feely, the Blagan staff, and our students who worked diligently transporting and sorting the books. And we very appreciated that effort. Coatson Hall has been the venue for many performances this past year. We again enjoyed the Curtis Institute musicians in the fall, and last month presented a 1-actor drama entitled Makrianis Unplugged. We also featured a musical version of the Odyssey by guitarist Joe Goodwin. Oops, sorry. This is, I'm sorry to say, I think my granddaughter, who just got off the plane. We're now truly on a roll with exhibitions, both virtual and actual. The Archives Department initiated a microsite for an online exhibit celebrating the 200th anniversary of the death of Heinrich Schliemann. This was the work of Natalie Vogeka-Brogan and her staff. It includes a series of podcasts, all of which can be accessed on the website. Naturally, we also celebrated the bicentennial of Greece with 2 exhibits devoted to 1821. The Free and the Brave was a major undertaking in the Makrianis wing, celebrating the role of American Philhellenes during the Greek Wars of Independence. It included material from the Gennadius Library, and a new acquisition, a small-scale statuette of the marble statue known as the Greek Slave, which was once considered the most famous piece of American sculpture. The exhibit was the brainchild of Maria Georgopoulou and her staff. In Corinth, our Steinmetz family fellow, Eleni Gitsas, helped to put up a show in the Archaeological Museum there about the Ottoman era in the Corinthia, which will continue until September 30th. so you have a chance to visit. The current exhibit in the Makrianis wing, entitled Hippos, is devoted to the role of the horse in ancient Athens. Here you see, Here you see the inspiration for this ambitious show, the horse burials at ancient Phaleron, excavated by Dr. Stella Chrysoulaki and her team. On the right, you see our Wiener Lab zooarchaeologist, Dr. Flint Dibble, taking a photo as our design team begin to place the horse skeleton on display. Here's just one of the cases highlighting Hippotrophia with objects from the Acropolis, the Keramikos, the Agora, and Glyphada. And the last is a black figure amphora displayed here for the first time. The appeal of this exhibit is its combination of a variety of objects from the disciplines of science, archaeology, history, and art. And I'm pleased to announce tonight that the exhibit has just been extended until June 4th. Sorry, I wish it were January 4th. Okay, and we sincerely thank the lending museums and Alpha Bank for the extended loans. Again, we launched a lecture series, all by experts on ancient horsemanship, and all of which are available on our video archive. Excerpts from some of these can be found on the exhibit's microsite, which is hippos.gr. And it seemed that every lecturer had some connection with horses, and they proudly displayed this in their talks, beginning with Dr. Mario Iozzo, the director of the Florence Archaeological Museum, who so generously loaned to Greece the famous Medici Riccardi bronze horsehead. The exhibit received, for us, a huge amount of publicity, both in the press and on radio and television, which so far has drawn crowds of over 3,000 people to the exhibit. This is not counting a number of group tours for students and many others, including, this was my favorite, the one for the Association of Retired Cavalry Officers. Unique for us was the programming for families and children, which included visits from Stella, the last remaining carriage horse in Athens, a special treat arranged for us by Anne McCabe and Bob McCabe. This was part of our special tours for families and school children. Many of the labels in the exhibit are specifically written and placed appropriately to engage children. Finally, we produced with Melissa Press a book for children, which you can see over at the exhibition, which is open tonight till 10 p.m. And another book is currently in press, which has 30 short essays on horses written by our graduate students, as well as other scholars who have an interest in horses. Now we turn to the school's archaeological field projects. Last summer, excavations were conducted at 5 sites: Megalopolis and Pylos in the Peloponnese, Maklos on Crete, and at our longstanding sites of Corinth and the Agora, albeit with reduced personnel since it was not possible to bring students from North America. We sincerely thank Lena Mendoni of the Ministry of Culture and the staff of the various ephorias who supported our work in the field and during study seasons under challenging conditions. We begin with the oldest site and the fourth of its 5 seasons, the lignite mines in the Megalopolis Basin. Dr. Takis Karkanis, the director of the Wiener Lab, is one of 3 project directors, along with Dr. Eleni Panagopoulou Karambella of the Effort of Paleoanthropology Speleology, and Dr. Katarina Harvati of the University of Tübingen. The goals of this project are, first, to obtain datable evidence of human presence during the Paleolithic. Second, to develop a chronostratigraphic framework, as well as an entire sedimentary sequence of the Megalopolis Basin. And finally, to reconstruct the paleo-environmental conditions and the geological evolution of the basin during the Pleistocene expansion. Fieldwork was conducted mainly in the Koremi and Kiparisi lignite mines. The team of a dozen scientific specialists inspected exposed artificial section profiles inside the mines, but also along the periphery of the basin, focusing primarily on ancient deposits with sedimentary characteristics. In reference to the faunal remains of the Middle Pleistocene, the most noteworthy specimen is an isolated macaque or monkey tooth and a well-preserved deer antler. This particular species of macaque found in Megalopolis has been identified, if you're interested in this, as a subspecies of the Barbary macaque, a monkey that still exists in Morocco, Algeria, and Gibraltar. The species had gone extinct in Western Eurasia, and in Megalopolis is the only evidence of the species in Greece from the Middle Pleistocene, which is 750 to 130,000 years before present. Geological sampling for paleomagnetic dating was carried out at the long profile exposed in the Kiparisi mine site. At the Koremi site, there was a large scatter of hippopotamus bones, possibly confirming that the hippo and other fossils from Koremi 6 are the oldest large mammal remains ever recorded in the megalithic basin. Lithic artifacts and fossils were found scattered inside a sand layer, and examples of these tools include back knives, bifacial leaf points, scrapers, and lots of flakes and chips. What is markedly different from other assemblages of the basin are the completeness of the flakes and the wide variety of tool types, possibly indicating a hunting stand where humans expediently exploited a kill and moved on. Karkanis and his team have published 4 articles in the Quaternary International Journal on their finds. Further south in the Peloponnese, work continued at ancient Pylos by the University of Cincinnati, in the field and in X-raying, sampling, and conserving the finds from the Griffin warrior tomb discovered in 2015. Of the 2 new tholoi discovered in 2018, Tholos 6, that's the one in red, proved to be the most interesting. What they call a special feature was uncovered in the dromos of this tholos, which consists of a long bowl-shaped pit sealed in late Helladic 2A. It was filled with remnants of gold and ivory objects, amber, and semi-precious stone beads. Because of the compacted nature of this feature, it is still being excavated. Articles on the Griffin warrior tomb have been published by the excavators Davis and Stocker, including one forthcoming in Hesperia. On Crete, the Synergasia at Moklos entered a 6th season under the direction of Professor Jeff Soules and Kostis Davaris, who sadly passed away at the end of the season. The Middle Minoan 2 structure seen here, and originally thought to be a house, turned out to be a unique building in the annals of Minoan archaeology, a waterworks. The water conduit, identified there by the arrow, was designed to supply the lower town with fresh water for several centuries, actually, according to the ceramic finds. A small lead figurine of a woman in a flounced skirt was found in the vicinity. One of the goals of the 2021 season was to remove a large dump that had accumulated on the site since Richard Seeger's excavations in 1908. And you can see that in the upper left there and along the top. It overlies part of a late Minoan I administrative building, which now appears to continue farther to the north. So work will continue this year on that. Excavation also took place on the summit of the island where a Byzantine tower stood. After removal of the rubble in 2 adjacent trenches, it was discovered that the tower dates to the Hellenistic period. It measures 14 by 11 meters and contained a sealed deposit of Hellenistic pottery, roof tiles, and marine shells. After being abandoned, perhaps due to an earthquake in the 1st century BC, it was eventually rebuilt in Byzantine times, but on a much smaller scale. The excavator, our director of archives, Natalia Vokeka-Brogan, has concluded that the presence of a Hellenistic tower on the summit of Moklos confirms its importance as an outpost of a powerful Hellenistic city in East Crete. Turning now to the Agora, I'm pleased to announce that the purchase of the larger plot of land covering the one that was covering the central section of the Stoa Poikile, thanks to the generosity, once again, of the Packard Humanities Institute. We hope to commence the demolition of the building as soon as possible. Excavation was carried out in the area of the classical commercial building, where further debris from the Persian destruction was found, as well as ostraca, some with the name of Xanthippos. Here was also found a fragmentary marble stele with an image of a seated man facing a standing woman. Part of an inscribed name is preserved and is dated to the 4th century BC. An even more intriguing inscription appeared in the area now identified as the Laocorean. Like the earlier inscribed bases, found rebuilt into the masonry of a Roman tank, the person named may have a connection with the tribe of the eponymous hero Laos. He is to receive a gold crown, quote, on account of his virtue and justice to his tribesmen, end quote. And an olive leaf is sculpted above the inscription, as you can see. It is altogether fitting that one of the major topographical features of the Agora, complete with identifying inscriptions, which may well have once included the most famous democratic symbol of Athens, the statues of the Tyrannosides, should be found in the penultimate years of its longtime director and much honored archaeologist, John Camp, who will be retiring after this summer's season. Congratulations, John, on 28 productive years directing the excavations of the Athenian Agora, and a lifetime commitment to the work of the American School. And just to show you a very charming object which came from the Agora last year is this terracotta head of Eros. And it was so cute that it became the logo on the excavation team's annual t-shirt. Now, we turn to Corinth. In 2020 and 2021, excavation was carried out north of the theater in the green area on the map under the direction of the Corinth director, Chris Pfaff. The main feature in this area is a Roman building with an impressive opus sectile floor. It has been called the Marble Room because of its paving and the marble benches along the wall. After the 2021 season, it had an exposed length of 6.8 meters and a width of 3.8. And we will, and its excavation is ongoing. And we'll hear much more about Corinth shortly, but first, a special treat. Just 2 weeks ago, a major find appeared in the fill above the Marble Room in the trench supervised by Pfaff. And we thank the Ministry of Culture for permission to show it to you tonight. It demonstrates once again the importance of Corinth in the Roman period and how its excavations continue to yield major works of art. You see here coming out of the ground a marble head, which is a Roman copy of the Castle Apollo type. Quite a beautiful object. It is now my distinct pleasure to present to you my successor as the next director of the American School, Bonna Westcoat, who I wish were here tonight with us, but maybe she's online. A distinguished professor of Greek art at Emory University and the director of the excavations at the Sanctuary of the Great Gods on Samothrace. As if that isn't enough, she is currently the interim director of the Carlos Museum at Emory. I wish her all the best when she takes over the reins in August. Finally, I want to thank each and every one of the staff of the American School. The pleasure I have had in directing the school comes in large part from working with such dedicated, talented, and professional people. The school runs smoothly and efficiently thanks to them, especially during these challenging past 2 years. Atticus and I will miss you. Now, I am turning over the mic to a well-known figure, Charles Williams, the Director Emeritus of the Corinth Excavations, who I'm delighted to have with us tonight. He's going to tell you about the genesis of the amazing conservation project taking place in Corinth, and will introduce tonight's distinguished speaker. And following the lecture, I invite all of you to repair to the garden for a reception. And again, I thank you for coming. And now to Charles.
Before the evening's discussion of the Roman frescoes of ancient Corinth, I would like to thank very much and warmly those who have been instrumental in doing the fresco project to the point where it is now standing. So many persons have helped so many ways that a list alone is unsatisfactory. But I have no better way to acknowledge them. First and foremost, I extend thanks to Lena Medoni, Minister of Culture, for her enthusiastic interest in the project. To Maria Merzani, head of the Directorate of Conservation, and to Yota Kasimi. She's the director of the effort of antiquities for the Corinthia. Also, many thanks go to Jenifer Niles, director of the American School of Classical Studies, to Panos Telos, general manager of the school, and to Christopher Pfaff, director of the Excavations. To Stella Buzzacchi, who was sole conservator of the frescoes in the 1980s and was the technical force behind the project, I offer special thanks. With her retirement, all work stopped until Roberto Nardi, director of the Centro di Conservazione Archeologica, his wife, Andreina Constani Cobal, and a team of professional conservators took on the 8-year restoration project. This evening, we are showing the results of the first 2 years of that work. The excavation in the 1980s was conducted with the aim of learning more about the neighborhood east of the theater. In excavating the north-south street east of the theater, we discovered that there was much of the roadway had been resurfaced with the addition of pockets of leveling fill. In those pockets were contained the discarded frescoes that had decorated the theater The pockets contained frescoes that decorated the theater's cavea in the early Roman period. We also recovered many discarded fresco fragments in dumped fills that supported the ramp to the back of the theater, cavea. Those fragments belong to more rooms than we can yet account for. We then, on the east side of Theater Street, we excavated a rather large structure constructed with impressive masonry, in which the 3 rooms contained frescoes which had fallen from the walls. One room had its upper walls decorated with garlands and musical instruments. The most important room of the 3 is the southernmost one, in which appears a group of gods in panels, including Aphrodite, who is shown in the form of her cult statue on Corinth. For further discussion of these frescoes, I now turn things over to Dr. Nardi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams, for your introduction. I would like to go immediately referring to the areas that Mr. Williams spoke about before. The first area is this one, East Theater Street and the Odeio ramp, and this area here. The first group of frescoes come from this area, and the second group of frescoes come from this area. So these are the 2 areas which were excavated by Mr. Williams. I would start saying that here I am only a spokesperson of a wonderful group made of several different professionals, a group that is working together since 2 years in a really wonderful teamwork. My first reference goes to our friends and colleagues from the Greek authority, to Maria Merzani and Iota Cassimi for the close collaboration that they are guaranteeing to this project. The second reference goes to the team, to the group of the American School Corinth project, to Christopher Pfaff, to Yulia Tsonu, and to the conservator Nicole Anastasatou, and to Super Manolis Papadakis for all what they do every day to guarantee the perfect implementation of the project. Then, of course, I have to thank my team that is all sitting here. Is a group in total of about 20 different professionals. I'm not going to tell their names except the senior one, who are Chiara Zizzola and Gianmario Porcheddu, who are guaranteeing full and continuous assistance for the success of this project. Mr. Williams before referred to a 2 years project. These have been strange 2 years. If I imagine the day that this project was commissioned to me, the first thing I said is, so nice. We finally have a project with no risk, in a beautiful country, no wars, no arrests, no kidnapping, no terrorism. But then the COVID arrived. So let's say that the calendar doesn't correspond exactly to the results that we have been produced until today, because probably when you hear Mr. Williams, who is the most optimistic person amongst all of us, saying that we are working since 2 years, the result that you will see probably will not pay you back for the 2 years. But trust us, we have 5 more years in front of us. We only touched less than 20% of the entire collection that Mr. Williams excavated during his excavations. As being first an archaeologist and second a conservator of archaeological sites, I normally spend most of my professional life in the midst of disasters. Disasters because the sites that are excavated and not protected. Disasters because the material culture that is not made accessible to scholars or to public. And I may go on with many different specifications, but I will stop here. So someone may think that our life is depressing. It's not true, because first, for the love that we have for archaeology and for our profession. Second, because once in a while, positive and magnificent projects arrive, and especially well-conceived projects, just like the one that Mr. Williams designed and planned 40 years ago, which is the project for the frescoes from Corinth. This is the project I will tell you about today. The Corinth excavation, the area of the theater, was excavated around the 30s, when the structures of the theater and the street nearby were unearthed. After this excavation, during the 80s and the 90s, Mr. Williams started a new excavation around the area of the so-called East Theater Street and the cavea ramp. These were times where some extraordinary event happened. The first one is that Mr. Williams was immediately attracted by the quality and the importance of the frescoes that he found, and surprisingly, he saved all the frescoes. How many times, according to your experience, frescoes, small fragments, are saved, collected, and protected? Very, very few occasions. Another extraordinary event of this project is that there was a conservator acting on site, Stella Buzzaki, who did an incredible job for years and years, and she recovered and collected any single fragment. But I can guarantee you that I'm speaking of fragments of 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. We are dealing with these things. I don't pretend that you trust me. I will show you the pictures. Stella, who is comfortably sitting there in a pithos, in a matter of years and years, she did really an incredible job, of course, supported by Mr. Williams, who clearly, immediately understood the potential importance of these frescoes from Corinth. The third extraordinary event of this project is that a new apotheke has been built in a record time at the service of the excavation of Corinth and at the service of the fresco project. This is the building that has been recently dedicated to Nancy Boukidis and Stella Buzzakis. And this is the quality of the building which finally allowed us to have all the spaces we need to implement such a scale project without problems or interference. It has to say that Mr. Williams waited for years and years and years, I would say at least a couple of decades, to proceed with the frescoes project, waiting the moment the proper facilities were available. This happened in 2019 when he asked us to come. So we have two groups of fragments of frescoes. I hope I will not tire or bore you with technical aspects, but I am a conservator, so you have no hope. You will have to go with me into technical details. The frescoes, the first group of frescoes have been excavated in this area, and the same typology, same part of the same walls have been found distributed in very far areas, meaning that these frescoes are not in original deposition. They were the result of ancient demolitions, and the frescoes have been distributed around to produce new floors, new levels to build up a new urbanization. We are talking of fragments of this quality, and we are talking mainly of numbers. This is one of the 365 trays of these materials, equivalent to 1,000 pieces of fresco that Nicole has been dividing in trays, Nicole, the conservator of Corinth, and making them available to us into a logical system, which of course is extremely helpful. We are talking of this kind of frescoes with a thick setting bed. We have, on most of them, we have all the original layers, and this is the quality of the materials that we are working with. Speaking of horses, Jenifer, this is your horse. I think no comments are necessary to judge the quality of these materials. So the first work we did with this group of frescoes has been trying to understand what it was about. So we prepare several tables with sand in order to hold the fragments in temporary positions and let us understanding the decorations we were talking about. Sorry, this. Slowly, getting familiar with the fragments and discovering traces of pencil, orientation of the painture, or scratches, or material components of the setting bed. We are slowly reassembling and studying and documenting what is this incredible collection of frescoes. Useless to say, this is a long process, but faster than what one can imagine, because you spend 2 months, 3 months with apparently no results, and suddenly in 1 week you see the panels materializing. This is the work in process. These are some of the panels that have been reassembled on sand, and they are ready to be put on final panels. Here, just to give a few comments, is the so-called panel with a chariot race. You can see some chariots directed this direction and other chariots going on the opposite. Useless to say, to make comments about the quality of these materials. This is another example. This frame is 10 meters wide and most probably will decorate the upper colonnade of the cavea of the theater. Is made of this upper decoration and by capitals and columns. Of course, a similar experience gives us the opportunity to study the fragments from various points of view, from the iconography and from the technology. You know how the Romans were boring. They were doing always and only things according to the procedures. And you never find something strange or something different. It's the case of our frescoes, where we can easily recognize the strata that Vitruvio indicates as a proper technology. Just to give you a few examples of some of the information that we are identifying in these fragments. This is the top of the top part of the decoration of what we believe is the upper part of the cavea, and you can see here that there is a molded decoration on top, and the molding go behind the painted surface. So this tells us that they first applied this decoration here, and then they applied the intonachino and the painted surface. Here we can see the string that was picked on the surface when the surface was still wet. And here you see the string, but here you see the string cancelled with a spatula because the painter was not happy with the line of the string. This is a small details that tell us a lot about the skill of these people and how precisely they will work. And we also find some scratches here, who are the measuring lines, and accidentally, which is not accidentally at all, these are 63 millimeters that when you multiply by 4 gives one dextant that is about around 25 centimeters, telling us that they were using this kind of measuring scale, which is absolutely normal. We didn't discover anything, but it's always a pleasure to find imprinted in a piece of frescoes what you expect to find. This is a kind of gossip. These are the same decoration, probably in 2 different walls of the same building, where here this pattern has been done with a nice brush, and here there was a lazy colleague who, instead of using the brush, he used the finger to do the same. The use of a compass with a center and with the lines belonging to these decorations. So this is just a little bit of the mountain of information that we are collecting and that we are getting from this incredible collection, and that we are classifying, waiting the moment to make this available to everybody. Going to investigations, we had a wonderful, we are having a wonderful collaboration with Dr. Karkanas and Dr. Michaelidis of the Wiener Lab of the American School, which they helped a lot us in defining the diagnostic program for investigating the constitutive materials, the executive techniques, the morphologies of the degradation, and others. At the moment, we made a program for the diagnosis, and we are waiting for the permission release from the Greek authority, for waiting for the moment that we will extend our visual investigation to instrumental ones. That is don't tell me what all this letter means, because I don't forget. There are young experts for this in the team. They will take care. I can guarantee you that with the help of with the Wiener Lab, lots will comes out to surprise you in the immediate future. The other completely different category of frescoes was discovered here in those buildings in primary deposition, which means that they were in their own original position when the buildings were abandoned and they slowly felt on the ground. The main characteristic is that all these frescoes are extremely thin. We are about eggshells, as in Tonachino, telling us that most probably they were applied on walls finished with intonaco based on clay, and the clay soluted with the rain, and only the final finishing, the final intonachino is left in place today. We are speaking of about 50 main pieces of frescoes to be added to the 120,000 pieces I told you before. This is a photograph showing one of the rooms when Dr. Williams and Stella were excavating this. This is a grid that Stella designed to help herself in collecting the pieces, and in fact help us today in working with this. This is the so-called wall of the garlands. These frescoes have arrived to us thanks to new setting bed made of fiberglass and resins that Stella applied on site. So all our process is to remove the fiberglass without losing the joints of the frescoes, and waiting the process of relaying them on a new support, made of background of lime-based mortar. This is because this way the frescoes will go back into a setting bed totally compatible with the original, then applied on synthetic materials. And this way there is no contact between the original and the synthetic materials that we applied, and all the process is totally reversible. This is the grid that has been designed to reproduce the grid during the excavation, where we relocated the fragments in order to understand the mechanism of the crushing, of the falling of the pieces of the frescoes, trying to understand the iconography of the wall. This is the grid at the end of the restitution of all the fragments with many overlapping. And on this we started to work, identifying the different decoration in the fragments. Just to give you an idea of how this mechanism worked, you can see here traces of green and dark decoration corresponding to two candelabra, telling us that the lower part of this wall, which is this one, was divided by 3 vertical candelabra, telling them that we are dealing with 4 different fields, with a yellow background and with the figures inside. This is after the moving of the fragments. You can see the fragments related to the candelabra, one here, one here, one here. The 4 yellow background filled. The figures, you don't see the figures, but you trust me, there are figures here, and the garlands. So this way, let's say when we arrived at this way and we understood what it was about, only at that time the proper restoration started. These are, I told you, I don't pretend that you trust me, this is one figure that we believe is an Apollo, and here we have traces of a lion, letting us, of course, thinking to an Heracles. Another group of frescoes we are dealing with, always from the same typology of very thin intonaco. These are the drawings of Stella when she recovered them, is referred to a unit, to a specific room of a unit that has been restored, and you will see here the result. So this is how we receive the pieces 20, 30 years after Stella restored them. Cleaning, of course, first step to understand and to read. You can see the fiberglass behind. Then fragments, joints. Search for joints. Then temporary fixing of the fragments in order to remove the fiberglass. We need to apply a new veil. This is a wedding veil that hold the pieces, giving us the possibility to read through. Then the pieces are turned upside down. Very dangerous passage. And then the fiberglass is removed. Then the reverse side is cleaned 20, 30 years after. And the new supports we call strato di sacrificio. That means a reversible stratum that in case can be removed. After this, the ensemble of fragments reunited together in what we call, of course, pizzas, is located in a one-to-one scale reproduction of the wall to try the final location. And then the final new setting bed made by lime-based mortar is applied before the application of the carbon fiber that will hold and will give structure to the pieces. And when these pieces are set this way, finally the last step of the work starts, that is the positioning on the final support made on aluminum honeycomb, which is a material that is very light, extremely resistant, so resistant that the body of the airplane are made of that. But what we like most of this material is that this is used in conservation of mural paintings since 50 years today, which means enough guaranteed in stability. So the wall is reconstructed in aluminum and fiberglass and aluminum honeycomb. The pieces are positioned in their final location, and then the panels are cut in sections in order to be easily movable in case they need to be transported from one exhibition or into a museum. We don't cut the lines straight because otherwise you would notice. We try to follow the design of the paintings so your eye doesn't catch up that there is a line over there. and the final finishing. The application of tooth grit, which is inorganic and natural, in direct contact to the aluminum honeycomb, and on this grit we will apply the final background made of lime-based materials, same composition as, same color as the original setting bed of the frescoes. So at the end, when you have the lacuna and you will look at the wall, you will think that there is simply the final intonachino missing, and you are looking at the actual structure. This is one wall of a room made of 3 walls that today are standing up in the apotheke, in the new apotheke in Corinth. The brown is the background that very soon will be filled with gray intonaco. The panels are self-standing, so you can exhibit this against the wall or in the middle of a hall. They are light and they can easily be moved. So this first room is finished. There is another one on the way. In about 6 months will be ready. And I have the pleasure to show you this first room as it show up today in the Bouzaki-Boukidis Center for Research. It's a room with the representation of Aphrodite surrounded by other deities or divinities. The future of all this is a new museum, a new center for research for wall painting studies that at the end of this project will be built in Corinth. I would like to conclude. Sorry, not for me. It was a real privilege to work with personalities such as Mr. Williams. So it's to him that we have to be grateful for everything. And the most modest person I have met, and to the person who alone did the work that we are doing in 14 people. To tell you how slow these conservators of today are. So I ask you to join me to give, to deliver our gratefulness to Stella Busacchi, who, please Stella. Thank you very much.
Now for the next 4 years. And thank you for a fabulous lecture. Thank you, Charles, for being with us tonight. And thank you all for coming. And I hope you will all celebrate in the garden down below. Thank you.